Dearest Jessica, I hope all is as well as can be and you are in good health, though I cannot help but feel sorrow at our current circumstances. I know how long it has been since my last letter, but I hope that despite all the distance and all that weighs on us, our bond remains as strong as ever. I am writing to you to discuss the outrageous Supreme Court ruling in the Dred Scott trial. Here in New York, talk of abolition and growing tensions between the North and South seem to occupy every conversation. You know well the debates that we have here, and I cannot help but think how different things must be where you are. I know that all of the people in Georgia must be feeling quite differently about all of this, and I must confess, I want to know what you think. I hear such troubling things about the goings-on down south, about the unrest at the border states, the constant talk of secession, and, most upsetting of all, the cruelty with which some treat their slaves. I worry about how you and the family fare in everyday life down there. Slavery grows more and more difficult for me to be okay with my own conscience. When Justice Taney came out with the ruling that enslaved people are not citizens, why I just simply couldn't bear to hear it. I mean, we really don't need slaves to make money. My dear neighbor up and sold all of his slaves away, and now he's making money with all these fancy new machines and using railroads. I've even heard talk that our industrialization is far more successful and profitable than slavery in the South where you are. And it is, I know, an uncomfortable subject to bring up, but I cannot help but ask, what do you think in all this? I know your husband, Adam, stubbornly believes in the views of his fellow Southern gentlemen, and while I do not wish to cause an argument, my heart aches to think of how different and how hard this must be for you. I try not to judge. I hope for the day when we can meet in the middle, when the country may heal from this bitter divide. I know that our differences are so vast, but still, I feel that the compromise of having free states and slave states is not enough. Here in the city, the progress of industry advances every day. Men and women work tirelessly in the factories to support their families and the dreams of the future without the use of slaves. And I cannot shake this feeling that this nation, which we once thought so united, may soon fall apart if nothing is done. I long for the day when we can sit together on our porch sewing clothes like we used to. How I cherish those simpler times, before all the fighting. Now there are men here whose only job is to catch runaway slaves, and everyone is suspicious of everyone. It feels as if there aren't any more free states because of Justice Taney's ruling. What does this mean for our future? The abolitionists fear that the South is trying to hold on to slavery as long as possible. Their conversations are getting more angry and more threatening towards the South. Please know that despite our different circumstances, I still think of you fondly. I pray that the day will come when we find common ground and peace might be restored, not only between us, but also for our country. My dear old husband, John, he's taken this all so hard. I fear that his heart can't take much more of this fightin'. I have asked him if there is anything that he wanted to say or anything that he wanted to write to you, and he said,
I do miss you. I wish we were as close as we used to be before all the fighting of slavery divided us on separate ends. Until something changes, I no longer want to talk to you. Bye.
Tensions are just so high these days. With all my love, wishing things get better, your devoted sister, Michelle.
Dearest Michelle, it is with a heavy heart that I write this letter to you. Your words echo in my thoughts, and though the distance between us is great, your concern and the love you always show me have bridged it for a moment. I am well, though troubled by the same weight that seems to hang over all of us. I am sure you can understand that living here in Georgia, it is difficult to feel anything other than a deep divide, and your letter only makes that divide feel more pronounced. I have read your words over and over, trying to understand them from your point of view, but it is hard to reconcile the life you describe in New York with the life here in the South. The very thought that we could ever do without slavery is almost incomprehensible to me. My heart aches as I read your lamentations about the treatment of the enslaved, and I cannot help but think of the painful paradox that exists in my own thoughts. How I love and care for many who work on our land and live in our household. Yet I know they are bound by chains I cannot loosen. What is this cruelty, and why can't it be stopped? I wrestle with these questions daily. You mentioned the Dred Scott case and the ruling by Justice Taney. I have read the decision, and like you, I cannot bear the injustice of it. How can it be that a man, a human being, is declared to have no rights, not even the right to claim his own freedom? It cuts me to the core, and I wish that there was some way to undo it. But you must understand, Michelle, that here in the South, there are those who see it as a confirmation of the status quo. They believe that the peculiar institution, as they call it, is essential to our economy and society. The arguments they make about its necessity seem to echo in every conversation and in every public meeting. And Adam, well, you know how firmly he holds his beliefs. He argues that without slavery, the Southern way of life will collapse. He is entrenched in that conviction, as are many around him. As much as the Dred Scott ruling has stirred up a sense of injustice in me, it has also served to deepen the divide between us and the North. Here in Georgia, the idea of secession is becoming more and more pervasive. Public gatherings and political meetings often revolve around whether or not the Southern states should break away from the Union. Many of our local leaders, in fact, are openly discussing the formation of a separate nation. There is fear in the air, fear of Northern aggression, fear that the abolition movement will gain too much traction, and that our very own way of life will be destroyed. The rhetoric of secession is gaining ground, especially after the ruling. I can feel the tension in the air, and though I fear the idea of a civil war, it seems that many around me believe it may be inevitable. There is also talk of the North's growing industrial might. I have heard the factories in the North are booming. Some people here are even starting to question whether the South can continue to compete in this new economy. You mentioned that your neighbor sold his slaves and began using new machinery, and I admit that news has made its way down here as well. There are whispers that in time, the North may leave the South behind economically. The cotton economy, which has been the backbone of our prosperity, is no longer as reliable as it once was, and though the land still produces in abundance, there is growing sense of insecurity. You may be aware, too, that the political landscape here is becoming more hostile. The national political scene is split in ways that I've never seen before. With the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the debates over the expansion of slavery into the new territories, the Union is teetering on the brink of collapse. The Fire Eaters, as they call themselves, are a powerful faction in Southern politics, advocating for aggressive action to protect and expand slavery. Even more moderate voices, those who once believed in compromise, are finding themselves caught between their fear of abolition and their desire to preserve the Union. In Georgia and in much of the South, the voices of compromise are growing quieter, while the call for secession grows louder. I know that you are worried about how Adam and I may be handling all of this, and I appreciate that concern more than you can know. In our home, the tensions are real. though we try to avoid talking too much about the future. There's part of me that wishes things were different, that we could simply be content as we were in the past. But I also know that this new world, with this division and its strife, it's changing everything. Adam is steadfast on his beliefs about the necessity of slavery, and though I do not share his convictions, I cannot help but understand his fear and what might come next. Still, you must know that I do not take these matters lightly. I, too, wonder where all of this is leading. I fear that we are on the precipice of something larger than any of us can control. Perhaps a war is coming, though I pray I am wrong. Perhaps the Union will survive, but it will be forever changed. I cannot say. What I do know is that it is becoming harder and harder to pretend that all is well, that we can simply go on as we have. The cracks are showing, and I worry that they may never heal. I wish that I had more comforting words for you, but I too feel the uncertainty that pervades this time. We are all caught in something much larger than ourselves, and I wonder where it will lead us. Perhaps to an answer we cannot yet see. But until then, I cling to the hope that love, and not hatred, will eventually be the thing that binds us together again. Please know that I think of you often, and I pray for your well-being, and for the day when we can all be reunited, not just in body, but in spirit as well. With all my love and my deepest affection, your devoted sister, Jessica.